Okay, I think we can get started now. Thank you everyone so much for attending this panel, Climate Solutions and Youth. Um, it's just a pleasure to be a part of a wonderful panel, to have all these terrific people. Thank you so much. My name is Matt Solon. I'm the Environmental Action Associate at Clearwater. We're going to hear from some terrific people today about the climate crisis, how young people can get involved and make a difference in regard to it. We're so excited because our first panelist is Jen Metzger. She is a former state senator and former chair of the Senate Agriculture Committee. Senator Metzger will be speaking about the climate action movement, her work to combat the climate crisis, and how youth can participate politically.
So I had to unmute. Hi, everyone. You can call me Jen rather than Senator. And Matt, thank you so much. It's really great to be part of this panel on youth and climate. This is such an important topic. And I always love to have the chance for a conversation about a subject that I'm most passionate about, and that's creating a just, equitable, and sustainable transition to a clean energy economy powered by clean energy and not fossil fuels. Youth have a critical role to play in making this happen. And young people are already playing a highly visible role around the country and around the world in demanding action to address the climate emergency. Leaders like Greta Thunberg from Sweden and Vanessa Nakate from Uganda and Varshini Prakash, who's right from neighboring Massachusetts, the co-founder of the Sunrise Movement. Now more than ever, we really need the bold and creative efforts of our youth, and we have to just harness our collective will and energies to address the climate crisis. We really have to transform our economy and society in a very fundamental way. It still runs primarily on fossil fuels, and we're unfortunately already seeing the profound consequences of that reliance. You know, this summer's heat waves in the Pacific Northwest were like previously unfathomable and were made 150 times more likely because of climate change. Many hundreds of people perished from the heat and more than 1 billion marine animals died. Not to mention, you know, the damage done from to roads and homes and infrastructure from extreme heat. And we also, of course, devastating wildfires consuming towns on the West Coast, flooding from New York City to Tennessee to Germany to China. And amidst all of this, all of these climate-related disasters, in August, the International Panel on Climate Change issued a report concluding that steep near-term reductions in greenhouse gas emissions are needed to avert the most dangerous warming scenarios. And, you know, we know this, right? Like the signs are all around us and we've got work to do, not tomorrow, but today. But on the bright side, there are solutions, and the kinds of changes we have to make to reduce greenhouse gas emissions have so many other benefits for our community that are worthy of action for their own right, for their own sake, including creating healthier communities, creating many thousands of good quality jobs in New York, reducing energy costs by using less, and becoming truly energy independent. Well over half of what we spend on energy leaves New York to pay for dirty fossil fuels. We could be investing that money right here in our communities in clean renewable energy. And we'll save $50 to $120 billion in health costs alone from cleaner air, according to a recent analysis for New York State, not to mention like the huge improvements to people's quality of life. So the opportunities for change, I believe, are truly exciting. I had been working on climate and energy issues at the community level for many years, like many of our fellow panelists tonight. and had the great fortune of serving in the state Senate at a moment when we could really move the needle in a major way. And we passed the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act in 2019. It was like my happiest moment in, in my time in the Senate. It's the most ambitious climate legislation in the country and also the most equitable. New York's committed in law to reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 40% by 2030. That's less than 9 years from now, and reaching net zero emissions by 2050. We're required to generate by 2030, we have to be generating 70% of our electricity from renewable sources. And then by 2040, have an entirely carbon-free system. No more fossil fuel fired electric generation. And importantly, at least 35% of the benefits of clean energy investments must go to disadvantaged communities with the goal of 40%. Frankly, from my perspective, I really think it needs to be more than that. Low-income communities and communities of color have suffered disproportionately from environmental harm, and this law is really committed to, really commits us to leaving no one behind in this clean energy transition, and we have to commit the necessary resources to get there. So now this is like where the rubber hits the road. We have to implement this law. The climate law created a Climate Action Council, which right now is developing the plan to get us to these ambitious goals. There will be public hearings on the proposed plan in the coming year, and a very important action our youth can take is to speak at the hearings or provide written comments and make your voices heard. This is a plan that's going to decide how well New York meets the challenge of the climate emergency we're in. I just want to give you a sense of like the scale of the kinds of changes we have to make. In the electricity sector, New York still relies on fossil fuels for 43% of our electricity. And we have to replace all of this with renewable energy, mainly wind and solar. And we'll need projects at all different scales, from small rooftop solar arrays to giant wind turbines off New York's coast. And we certainly have no business building new frac gas power plants like Danskammer, which we were just discussing a few moments ago, hoping the DEC will reject. We also have to drastically change the way we get from one place to another. Transportation is the leading source of greenhouse gas emissions in New York, and we'll need to have at least 3 million electric vehicles on the road in New York in the next 9 years to stay on track to meet our emissions goals. Just to give you a sense of like how big an increase that is, like as of October 2020, there were about 56,000 zero emissions vehicles on the road. So that's like a long way to go in a very short period of time. And of course, it's not just about like swapping gas cars for EVs. It's also about like walking more, cycling more, and taking public transportation. These are all parts of the transportation solution. And then the next biggest source of climate damaging emissions is from our buildings, our homes, our schools, our workplaces. There are over 6 million buildings in New York, and the vast majority of them rely on gas or oil for heating and hot water. Most people have gas stoves. All of those I think it's 6.2 million buildings, plus the new ones that get built, will have to be electrified with heat pumps and other efficient technologies and off of fossil fuels by 2050. And to stay on track to meet those goals, up to 2 million homes will have to be electrified with heat pumps in the next 9 years. And as well as weatherized and made more efficient. So this is like a massive scale of change. And we have to make sure we're doing this equitably. We have to have the funding in place to help low, moderate income households adopt these more efficient technologies, make improvements to their homes. Now I actually have another action you can take if you are if you are interested. I'm going to post a link in the chat to a letter to Governor Hochul urging her to make the necessary commitments to green affordable housing for disadvantaged communities, as well as revising the regulations, state regulations, so that they no longer encourage fossil fuels in buildings. So here, I'll put this link in the chat. Or maybe I'll do that here, just a second. Sorry about to. All right, I'm gonna have to do that in a little bit. Let me finish up first. Okay, so I hope I've given you kind of a picture of how big the changes are that we have to make and how quickly we have to make them. And keeping in mind, of course, that all of these changes have really important economic, social, and health benefits for us beyond reducing climate damaging emissions. So it's, we'll have a healthier, happier society by making these changes. And our youth can play such a huge role in making this scale of change happen. A lot of this is about educating our communities and raising awareness so that we make the right choices. In every decision we make, we have to think about how it's affecting our carbon footprint, decision to walk, take a bus, or drive, decision of what kind of vehicle to buy or whether to buy one, decisions about how we use energy in our homes and our workplaces and what kind of energy we use. In a very direct way, you can have an impact by talking about these decisions and raising awareness about the need for climate action, like, with your family, in your school, at your place of worship, in your community, any social connections you have. Young people are absolutely the most powerful messengers about climate change because your generation is most impacted by the decisions we make today. And, I see it when young people speak, people listen. There's a reason why Greta and other leaders are such, just rock stars on climate. They're incredible leaders, but this is the planet you are inheriting, and who better to speak to the actions we need to take. You'll be hearing from some very inspiring young leaders, fellow panelists tonight, and the work they're doing and opportunities for youth involvement. But I just want to encourage you to get involved in the movement if you are not already, whether it's joining a community-based or advocacy organization, or getting involved in a school climate club, or even starting one. I had the chance to speak with the New Paltz High School Climate Club not long ago, and they're doing some really great projects, from creating pollinator gardens in public spaces to protesting dance camera. You can also get involved in school government, use that as a platform. And even in local government, one of my former staff members in my Senate office, Zach Constantine, he actually started as an intern, and then I hired him after his internship. But he decided to run for town board in his town at the age of 19, which is incredible. And now he's 21, and he's considering running for state assembly. We need young people to be at the table where decisions are made, especially when it comes to climate and environmental justice issues. And it doesn't have to be an elected position. You can join as a youth member of, local government environmental council or climate action committee, which are volunteer positions. That's actually how I got my start in government in my town. I joined the environmental commission, and then chaired the town's environmental commission before running for office. And then just one last point, you might also consider a green jobs career path, which is so important to our successful shift to a clean energy economy. We don't have nearly the workforce that we need for the clean energy transition in New York. We need architects and designers and contractors and builders and heat pump installers and organic and regenerative farmers and climate educators. There are just like so many job possibilities when it comes to green jobs and sustainability. So I will stop there, but I'm really looking forward to hearing from our other panelists and to the conversation tonight. And I'll post that link as soon as I figure out how. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jen. Our next panelist is Laurel Zaima, and she is the Education and Outreach Coordinator at Lamont-Doherty Earth Observatory, and she'll be sharing information on the programs and resources that LDEO have developed for youth climate action and what next steps that young people can take in the climate movement.
Thank you, Matt, for the introduction. And I just want to say I'm so honored to be here and so excited to just share a little bit about what Lamont's doing and just getting to know you all better as leaders in the climate movement. I also want to apologize if you hear any crying. That's my dog. One of the perks of working from home. Okay, so I am the Education Outreach Coordinator at Lamont, which means that I get to work with these scientists that are researching all aspects of Earth's system. I get to talk to them and learn about the hows and whys and why their research is so important. And then I make this information accessible to the students and teachers and the public through the creation of lessons and activities and direct programming. So we focus heavily on youth empowerment through climate action and youth climate education, because you all are the future. And so you are going to be propelling the climate action to create a more sustainable future. Okay, so youth climate education and activism is critically important. Incorporating youth in the climate movement is key for success. And there's a couple reasons why that is. First, young people, you bring fresh perspectives and solutions. You have this amazing creativity that really doesn't have any boundaries or inhibitions, and we need that. This generation is exposed to more worldly news than any other generation before you. And that's because of this incredible network and social media platform that you have. So you have this amazing information tapped in, and it allows you to be more activated. Also, as Senator had just mentioned, young people have power, especially when you band together. People listen to young people. So that is crucial. Your voices are heard, and these voices can be the catalyst for change. And finally, you all are you're activated, you're passionate, you're energized. And this is what we need to develop these climate solutions. Okay, so I know we have some young people watching today. And so I just wanted to pose this question to you all. And we can do something called a waterfall. So you guys can decide, how do you think we best create change? Is it through our individual carbon footprint, or is it through systemic change of entire sectors? So choose either one or two, and then on three, we're all gonna click enter in the chat, and we're gonna see what really pops. All right, ready? 1, 2, 3. Okay, wow, lots of twos, a few ones. Thank you for doing that. I would agree with the twos. So there's a couple reasons for that. And that's because if you think about the greatest greenhouse gas emitting sectors, that includes electricity and food and land use, industry, transportation, buildings. We don't, as individuals, have a huge impact in our day-to-day lives on these huge sectors. So besides reducing our consumption of electricity, or maybe choosing to eat less meat or something like that you can do in your own lives to lower your carbon footprint, our day-to-day, we don't have a lot of control in these sectors. So that could make you feel a little negative that our carbon footprint has a minor impact. But I actually look at it as a positive, because if our future relies on every single person being perfectly carbon neutral, living this perfect life, which is extremely hard and means a lot of sacrifices, I don't know if we could get there. So thank goodness people don't have to be perfect, because no one's perfect, right? It really relies on people collaborating and working together to make change outside of yourself. It's not one person that's going to save the world. It's not just you or just me. It's all of us working together. And I think that is crucial when you think about the impact that you want to make in your own community, is to bring other people on board with you. So if you are in the stages of wanting to create a climate action plan, maybe in your school community, maybe in your neighborhood, these are some of the steps that I would suggest you take. So first, it's really important to talk about climate change. It's not talked about enough. The more people talk about climate change, the more people realize that this is critically important, that everyone needs to address it. So talk to your community, your friends, your family about the challenges that you're trying to address. And by doing this, you're actually going to encourage people to join you. You're inviting people to join your efforts, and you'll have a bigger impact through this collective action. And then once you have your team working together, it's really important to collaborate and encourage people to use their diversity of skills and perspectives and knowledge, because we need all the skills. We don't need a million climate scientists. We need people coming from everywhere where they're at. We need people that are passionate about politics and education and the arts, communication. We need it all. So the more diversity you have in your team, the better. And if you're an individual and you're like, I don't even know where to start, this might be something that you can do at home. So I'm actually taking this from one of my role models, Dr. Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson. She has a great podcast called How to Save a Planet, if you're interested. But this is just a great way to kind of brainstorm where to begin. So the first thing you want to think about is, what are you passionate about? What gets you out of bed in the morning? Because the work in the climate movement needs to be sustainable. You can't burn out. You gotta love what you do every day. So I think that's really important. Then what are you good at? Remember, we need all the skills. So even things that you think might not be relatable, put them down, because you never know. I think they're all important. And then finally, what role do you want to play in the climate movement? And if you can find that sweet spot between these three, I think you're going to be making a bigger impact than just focusing all your energy on reducing your carbon footprint. So this is just a little bit for you all to think about. Lamont, we have a couple different programs that I want to share with you, mostly collaborative programs. As you can see, the theme here is working together. But I would just want to share a couple with you, and there are some that you might be able to get involved with as well. So the first one is Rockland Planning Land Use with Students, or R+. This is one of those collaborative programs with Keep Rockland Beautiful, Rockland Soil and Water District, and the Rockland Youth Bureau. We couldn't do it without all of these people. But the focus of this is really engaging high school students to think about their local community, think about their county, and how the development is being created in these spaces, and is it sustainable? So the students, they get a background on sustainable planning. They learn about the climate impacts of their region, and they learn about the community themselves. Then they're tasked with creating a development for a space in their community that's actually up for contention. So if you were a builder, what would you put in this community that fits the needs of all the residents, all ages and stages of life, that fits the community character, and also is planning sustainably and building with resilience? So we really encourage the students to develop with climate smart communities in mind. And when they're creating the sustainable plan, they need to see their project, which stands for social, economic, environmental, and equitable. If their plan really considers each one of these 4 categories, then we would say that this is a sustainable plan and they can go forward with it. And finally, every area in the world is experiencing different climate impacts. So thinking about our area, understanding the impacts that are projected for us, how can we plan with resilience in mind? So the students, they create this plan, and then they actually have the opportunity to share with mentors, working professionals in the community. where their voices are heard, and then the mentors are actually able to give them advice and feedback so they can make this a reality. Another program we have, this is our summer internship program. So if you live in Rockland, this might be something that you could get involved with. It's called the Next Generation of Hudson River Educators. So this program focuses on connecting high school students with the Hudson through field-based investigations and exploration. So they're going out there, they're doing the science. And then after they've gained this foundational knowledge, they share what they've learned with their own communities. And that comes in the form of social media posts or YouTube videos or PSA posters, or even directly communicating with the public. And so this is a very local scope, but this summer we incorporated climate lessons every Friday that were hosted by the Columbia University's International Research Institute of Climate and Society. And so these are the lessons that they outlined. You can see that they really build on each other. But each one was focused with discussion-based activities. And while some of these topics are kind of complex, they actually did a great job of making them accessible through a lot of STEAM components. So one in particular that I just wanted to share, Imagine a Future City. They wanted each student to actually draw out how they would improve and retrofit their own community to be more sustainable. And this was one of the images that was drawn by our intern this summer. So Caitlin created this incredible utopia society that is very green and sustainable. There's a lot to unpack here, so I just wanted to point out a few things. Caitlin really focused on climate mitigation in a couple different ways with solar panels. She has composting bins here. Trees was a major emphasis because of carbon capture, but she also wrote that she wanted to incorporate more trees in her neighborhood because it promoted environmental equity, that in her area, it is a community of color, and she feels like they are disproportionately impacted by climate change because they have no green space, that they are impacted by the urban heat island effect. So temperatures are actually hotter in their neighborhood because they don't have this green space and trees. So by allowing for more parklands and to plant more trees, she wants to help that problem and promote recreation in her community as well, which I thought was wonderful. So Columbia is really excited because they just started this Columbia Climate School that is educating students, graduate students right now, soon to be undergrads, people in corporate spaces, and also high school students. So this is one of the pre-college programs. These are all high school students from around the country, and we even had some international students, and they all met us in Castleton, Vermont for 10 days. And it was like a climate boot camp where we all learned from each other. We all learned about climate change. A lot of the professors were Columbia researchers, but at the end of the program, the students thought about their own communities, what the challenge was that they wanted to tackle, and they created a climate action plan. And the whole point of this action plan was for them to take it home and actually implement it in this school year. So they had to be very practical. They had to think about where their funding sources are coming from, who the stakeholders are, who are they going to engage to make this project happen. And so they actually shared back some of their projects with us, and that they have some roots set in to try and make these things happen, which was really amazing to hear and very empowering for the students. So this is another program. If you're interested in spending some time in Vermont with us, you can definitely do that as well. And there are scholarships for these things as well. And going back to our partnerships, through a lot of different collaborations with different organizations in New York State and New York City, we've had the opportunity to share some more climate education and some of the research that's being done at Lamont with families and even younger students. So this list is just a few of the events that we've been able to participate with, but it's just been really great to foster this curiosity in young people, and also just to start climate education early. And in these fun festival events, they always are so excited. And given the pandemic, we were working remote for a little bit, but we took this opportunity to really bolster up some of our educational material that is open source and free to use for any educators or teachers, or even for US students to explore. So remember, I told you we work a lot with the polar geophysicists. So we have this polar curriculum that looks at how changes in the Arctic and the Antarctic can impact us, even being so far away from them. And we also create some YouTube videos that you can check out, focusing more on some local impacts, specifically impacts in the Hudson Valley and in the Hudson River. And that's it. Thank you so much. I'm happy to take questions, or you can always email me as well.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Laurel. And we'll be doing some questioning at the end. Our next panelist is Joel Rodriguez, and he is the Sustainability Education Manager at Groundwork Hudson Valley. He'll be discussing the science barge they have, which runs a wide variety of programs and works with young people on the role humans play in climate change and how to track climatic weather events.
Okay, thanks so much. I don't know how I'm going to follow Jen and Laurel here. Fantastic speakers. Such a wealth of knowledge. I'm just kind of a down-to-earth kind of guy. And Groundwork Hudson Valley is a national organization. There's several chapters around the United States, and we have basically a mantra which says that we are changing places and we're changing lives. And the way that we do this is through climate resiliency, talking about youth development, and then sustainability education. So our climate resiliency is basically we're working with community residents and we're restoring the urban landscape, promoting long-term economic, environmental, neighborhood renewal. Jen was talking about making the rubber hit the road, right? Like that's what we're doing. We're actually in the communities. We're doing charrettes where we're sitting down and we're actually helping them create a green infrastructure. As we all know from Hurricane Ida that kind of came through, there was a lot of flooding actually in downtown Yonkers. Lots of people had a lot of damage to their property. And we came in, we were able to start helping them remediate some of those things by also helping some green spaces so that we could have more permeable spaces to absorb the rain and prevent flooding in those areas. But we don't just go in there and just do it for them. We have this conversation. And I think what's really important, especially for the youth to know, is that you might have a great idea, but you want to make sure that the idea that you are going to give is also well received by the community. And you won't get that idea unless you sit down and you actually talk with them. So you have these conversations with them. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer than usual. Some people ask some very interesting questions, but it's a learning experience for the community and for you, because I think it happens a lot. Like people just assume that they know better for somebody and then they just go and do something, right? And that's why it's really important that we actually start working with youth. Youth become our ambassadors. There's a lot of youth development. We mentor over 100 students every year in a year-round program that includes summer jobs, after-school employment, and internships. And so the students learn team building, they learn how to communicate, they learn about green infrastructure. And it's one of the few programs that has been running for about a decade now and was recognized by the former president, President Obama, and the Department of Interior as being the standard bearer for one of the youth conservation programs within the United States. And so we're very proud about that. Youth should know that don't look for accolades right away. You really have to just kind of roll up your sleeves and do the work. And then all of those awards are going to come towards you, right? Somebody gave me the analogy the other day that, that the environmental movement is kind of like bamboo. It grows really, really slow the first couple of years, and then it shoots up literally by feet in a single year. And so that can happen to you as well. So you're trying to think about building capacity, you're building, starting right where you are. Find a hero, find an ally, find somebody that you can mentor from, right? Because chances are that if you're thinking about something, there is also somebody also thinking about it as well. And so you're trying to find and connect with those people, but talk with people. You know, it's not like when you were a kid and you know, don't talk to strangers, right? We're all friends here, right? Everybody here on this call wants to help one another, right? And I think that that one of the downfalls for the environmental movement has kind of been like people kind of silo themselves off because they think that they know what's best and that their way is the best way of doing it. And unfortunately, that's just not how it works, right? You have some great ideas, somebody else has some great ideas, right? Somebody can see blind spots that you can't, right? So let people fill in the gaps where you don't have knowledge, right? Don't be proud, you know, and that's where education kind of comes in, right? You're going to start to put your feet on the ground once you've got your education. That's why we kind of focus on sustainability education, and we're working with youth in Yonkers in 7th through 12th to talk more about how science really plays a part in knowing that climate change is actually happening, but also like this is the key in which that you need to be able to tackle the challenges that are up ahead. So we have the science barge, which is a totally off the grid floating farm, and it's 2,200 square feet. It's basically an example, like, you know, you hear about people talking about, oh yeah, do solar, yeah, do wind, right? That's great, but can people actually go and see these things? Right? They've seen pictures of them. Maybe they've seen videos about them, but the science barge is this living, breathing sustainability tool, right? Where people can actually see, wow, I can actually have a farm on here. This past year, we've grown probably close to 400 pounds of food, which we didn't save for ourselves or snack on. We actually donated to the local YWCA. And it wasn't just food that we thought that they wanted. We actually asked them, what do you want us to grow for you? And the overwhelming majority was like collard greens and kale. And somebody asked me for ingredients for callaloo. If you're coming from like the Caribbean, it's a type of amaranth. Somebody asked me for culantro. I don't know if anybody cooks like, but you know, sofrito. If you've ever had sofrito, culantro is one of those things that you need for sofrito. And so again, this is about connecting with people, right? We can't live in a bubble. We can't afford to not talk to one another. And we also we can't not afford to look at all of these pieces, right? So if we're talking about sustainability, we really have to look at the people. How is it going to be economically sustainable? And how are we going to help the environment at the same time? All three of these things kind of happen kind of seamlessly. And it only happens when we start with the education, developing our youth, and then talking with the communities that we're in so that we can create a more climate resilient society. I don't know, I don't have anything else, you know, than that, but if you want to do something, you can just start small, right? Work from peak to peak. You know, if you're in the valley, get out of the valley, right? Get to the next peak, right? Find somebody, latch on to somebody. There's always somebody who's inspiring you. There's somebody who has done what you've done or is feeling what you're feeling, and you are not alone. There's a whole bunch of people out there that are willing and waiting to help you, just like everybody here on this panel. I can guarantee if you reach out to them and you ask them some questions, they'll be more than happy to answer them for you and help guide you in the right direction. And if they don't know the answer, they'll be humble enough to tell you, hey, listen, I don't know the answer, but I think I know somebody who does, right? So don't be afraid to ask questions, right? We're all friends here. We're all living on one planet. This is our home too. Okay, so be proud about it. Don't be afraid and be bold.
Well said. Thank you so much, Jalal. Okay, our next panelist is Jalal Sabur, and he is the environmental justice educator at Kite's Nest and is also a representative from Sweet Freedom Farm, and he'll be speaking about his work in training BIPOC youth in farming.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, everybody. My name is Jalal, and like Matt said, I'm a farmer, and I'm an organizer and an educator with youth at Kite. So my main project is the Sweet Freedom Farm. And I've been doing Sweet Freedom Farm for the last 10 years or so. I'm from the Yonkers, like White Plains area. So shout out to Groundworks. But I moved upstate about 10 years ago to farm full time in the Hudson Valley. And yeah, just been trying to be one of the farmers of color in this area, which hasn't been really an easy task. But I think for me, coming from like the environmental justice world to the food justice world and wanting to do something more tangible and really like looking at the history, for me was like looking at a lot of our elders in the past and seeing what they were doing and what were the lessons from the past, and bringing that to today. And so learning from the past is never like a wrong thing to do. There's plenty of solutions that have come from our elders and our ancestors that we just need to really embrace today. A lot of things we have lost. And so a lot of my work is like embracing what has happened throughout history with our ancestors. And even like my work with young people, that's like the main thing that I talk about is like, okay, what were our ancestors doing? Especially like when we're growing food, like what, how did they survive? Like, what was the survival techniques? And I always like talk about some of these like freedom fighters, like talk about Harriet Tubman a lot. I was like, Harriet Tubman was trying to like free our people from enslavement, but she was also growing food at the same time. And so like, that's how she survived. That's how our folks like survived the Underground Railroad, right? It was like the fact that Harriet Tubman knew how to like forage and like eat off the land and like was an herbalist and knew how to grow food. And so like knowing that part of like our survival is like really resonates with like a lot of the young people that I work with. I always talk about like Malcolm X too. Just Malcolm X has this quote about like the basis for all freedom and justice. This is it's not an exact quote, but the basis for all freedom and justice is like based on land. For freedom, justice, and equality is based on land. And so like hearing that Malcolm X quote and like knowing what Malcolm X meant to Black people in particular, I think it resonates with me and a lot of the young people that I work with around like, okay, what does that mean for us today? Like, how do we get justice and equality from land if we don't have land? And so like talking about like, what are the models of like land ownership that we can really embrace when we're farming, and like, how do we farm in a way that is like equitable? So like talking about cooperative, like worker cooperatives in farming, talking about what is a land trust, like how to build a community land trust in our area. And so, and where I live is close to a city called Hudson, and Hudson, and Kite is based in Hudson. And so a lot of the young people I work with at Kite in Hudson, we're just going through a lot of like housing crisis. And so a lot of people are dealing with housing crisis. And so not just talking about like climate justice, but talking about like all the issues that people are dealing with on a daily basis. So thinking about those solutions, like, is a land trust a solution for a housing crisis, but is it also a solution for like growing food and like equity around like regenerative farming? And so thinking about, okay, can we build a community land trust in Hudson that is addressing affordable housing and green space and access to fresh food? So yeah, that's some of the work that I've been doing. Yeah, I think with Sweet Freedom, I just go into like that history. Like for me, it became like a connection to some of the elders too. Like one of my elders was in prison for over 45 years. And so the farm kind of like started from going to visit him in prison, and wanting to figure out like, okay, he was a former Black Panther, and knowing the history of the Black Panthers, where they were Black people that were trying to feed our folks and make sure that we had free healthcare and make sure that we were like fighting for justice and equality too, right? But there was a lot of oppression that they were met by, and so, but a lot of them were like still in prison, and the history and the lessons that they went through are still around. And so for me, it was just like, okay, like how do I talk to the elders that are still around but are in prison or you know, are dealing with certain issues and not really supported. And so like supporting the elders that were in prison, the former Black Panthers, was like a way for me to like get some of that knowledge. And so when like meeting Herman Bells is from a Black Panther that I was like building with in prison, talking to him about what we could do today, he was like, we needed to actually like support people in prison by giving families a ride to see their loved ones in prison. And so that was a way for us to keep families connected. And that was also a way for us to like get them fresh access to food. And so that was one project that we started to do, connected with the elders in prison and other folks in prison, was like bringing families up to see their loved ones in prison and giving them a package of fresh food from a farm. And so that was just something that was like, okay, like we kind of know that our communities are being over-policed and over-incarcerated, but they're also dealing with lack of access to food, and they're also dealing with like climate justice, and they're also dealing with like housing crisis. And so just thinking about what are the certain things that we can do to like address some of those pains that folks are going through. And so that was like one project that we started, was just like bringing folks up to see their loved ones, getting them food. And then we would like bring people after they would go see their loved ones to a farm and like actually like spend time on a farm. Cause like a lot of the people are in the city and don't actually like get to spend time on a farm and get that connection to the land. And so just reconnecting people to the land that have like lost that connection was a way to get folks on land again. And then, like Matt was saying, a lot of the work that we're doing is educating the next generation. And so talking to the next generation, bringing them to the farm and making sure like they're understanding that we're growing food for these families and for folks in prison. And so that kind of like resonates, but it also like brings them to the land and like gets them to like learn about how to grow that like culturally relevant food that Jalal was mentioning. So like we grow okra and collard greens, and I do maple syrup and sorghum syrup and rice and all these things that have like African heritage. So yeah, it's been like a journey to like talk about all these things and like build this farm project and do it with like folks of color and trying to get support to do that. I think we also want to make sure that, yeah, we're talking about the mass incarceration system and like building a space for like when people come home from prison, they can learn how to be on land. And so a lot of the work that I've been doing is like going into prison, talking about what does it mean to like start a farm that could be cooperative, that could be a worker-owned farm, and that can be run in a restorative manner. So yeah, that's happening. Yeah, I think I will stop there. And then if folks have any questions about like Kite's, I can talk more about Kite's. That is like another organization that my friends start. So a lot of young people that come to the farm are from Kite's. But Kite's has its own kind of programs that we've been doing for a long time. There's a community garden in Hudson that Kite's is running, that is run by like a youth farm, but also has a section that is like open for like community plots. And so there's a group of teenagers called Regen that run the Kite Nest Garden, that they have a community compost project. They have like a bike blender that they go to farmers markets and like make smoothies with. And yeah, they run the community garden. So those are some of the Kite Nest programs that are happening too.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, man.
Yeah. Okay. These have just been terrific. So I guess I'll talk now a little bit about voting and sort of, getting involved that way. As you have heard from our wonderful panelists, there are many ways to combat the climate crisis. I want to rein it in a little bit and just kind of talk about what most people can do to combat the climate crisis. You can vote. Even if you aren't 18, if you're 16 or 17, you can pre-register to vote. And you can also encourage family and friends to vote for climate champions. And this year, you can ask them to vote for the Green Amendment, which is Prop 2. This November, we have an election. And people across the state will be casting their ballots for town boards and supervisors, for mayors and county executives, for county legislatures and county comptrollers. But there's another part on that ballot where you won't be voting for a man, but an amendment, where you won't be voting for a candidate, but a cause. The Environmental Rights Amendment to the New York State Constitution is on the ballot. We will etch the simple yet eloquent words, each person shall have a right to clean air, clean water, and a healthful environment into our state Bill of Rights. It'll empower lawyers and lawmakers to view the health and well-being of our environment in a completely new light. If we had one long ago, maybe we wouldn't be seeing the levels of degradation we've seen. Maybe those families would not have suffered at Love Canal. Maybe those children would not be getting asthma and cancer at the rates they are in Newburgh. Maybe those people in the Upper Hudson would not have found PCBs in their water. We'll also empower fish advisories, the process of conveying the danger of eating certain types of fish to certain types of people, depending on age, sex, and pregnancy status. You should not be consuming certain types of fish from certain places in the Hudson. The Green Amendment would help protect people from eating fish with dangerous levels of contaminants, and could one day lead to us not even needing a fish advisory, because the fish will truly be clean and the river will truly be clean. And this is our chance to turn the page. Only about 26% of New Yorkers voted in the 2019 elections, which is a similar one to this one. We're not voting for president, we're not voting for Congress. Only 1 out of every 4 New Yorkers will make this choice for the rest of us, because they will choose to make their voices heard. To secure our rights to a clean environment, New Yorkers must come out to vote. To inscribe these rights as a matter of law, New Yorkers must come out to vote. To protect the environment, not just for ourselves, but for all those who come after us, New Yorkers must come out to vote. Urge your family, urge your friends to come out to vote, flip it around and vote yes on Prop 2. This amendment is about making it a matter of natural rights that by virtue of being a citizen of this state, we can expect and we should demand a clean environment in which to live. And when we do, we'll move this state toward becoming a beacon for all those who seek a cleaner world. Thanks. And now we will be moving into the Q&A portion. And we have Dior Williams from Round Out to help us out with that.
Well, first I'd like to say thank you to all of our panelists for those amazing presentations. I'd also like to say thank you to Amali Nabla, Ruthie Gold, Matt Salton, Manajo Green, and anyone else who contributed to this insightful event that Clearwater has hosted for educators and youth with a special sense of responsibility, and desire for action on topics surrounding climate solutions. My name is Dear Williams, and today I will be representing the Rondout Valley Human Rights Club, as well as asking our panelists some questions pertaining to their presentations, youth involvement, and climate solutions. The Rondout Valley Human Rights Club is a group very special to my heart. We pride ourselves on our outreach within our high school, community, and beyond. Our mission statement is as follows. The Rondout Valley Human Rights Club is here to raise awareness for people whose rights are being violated. We support and defend equal rights for all humans. We inspire the next generation to be a part of the solution. Some things our club has done pertaining to climate solutions include our Stand Up for Climate Change rally at our school. We have sponsored speaker Tim Guinea of Climate Reality Project to present within our district. And we have helped in spreading awareness and collecting support for the opposition of the Dan Scammer power plant alongside Clearwater. Some work and recognition we have outside of our school include our presentation at the Mohonk Consultations, Creating and Sustaining Peace, promoting youth involvement in education of the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. In 2022, we were also the recipient of Mohonk Consultations Distinguished Achievement Award, as well as the Ulster County Youth Bureau Youth Helping Youth Award. The Rondout Valley Human Rights Club are also active youth advocates for topics such as Black rights, women's rights, Indigenous rights, LGBTQ rights, police reform, and more. We love to visit and/or collaborate with local activists and community organizations, and we also love to have visitors at our weekly meetings. Thanks for listening to that brief summary of who the Human Rights Club is and what we do. I know there are some members of the club in the webinar today. We are happy to be here, and I'm happy to have this opportunity to ask the panelists some questions. Now, to the panelists. The theme of this event is Climate Solutions and Youth, which acknowledges the significance of the role that youth will play in the future of sustainability action. As you all work towards sustainability, as well as work with youth, my question is, what has surprised you the most about youth you have worked with? As some of you work to educate youth on climate action, what have you learned from the youth? And how has youth perspective impacted your active contributions to climate action?
I'll go. Through our youth development program, we've developed a lot of people who are becoming leaders in their own right. And so that's one of the goals of the program. And one of the outcomes of that was a student named Julian. And Julian was with us working with Groundwork Hudson Valley for several years. Loved the work that he had done. He had worked on the science barge as an intern and working in the community. He's runs a program that in his after school, he runs a club, an environmental club. And then what he did was kind of through us, he just started kind of thinking, what could I do in my school? And so he ended up taking the environmental club and started creating plans to help greenify the school. So, we didn't prompt him. We didn't tell him to do any of these things, but this is like one of those benefits of when you pour so much into somebody, it has to go someplace. And your hope is that it becomes something that's creative. In fact, he's become so vocal that our Congressman Jamal Bowman had a conversation with him and started talking with him. And in fact, that's how we got an audience with Jamal Bowman to talk a little bit more about climate change and how important green jobs and green infrastructure is. And so he unwittingly, I mean, just through his own actions, created an opportunity for us to now make more of a connection with the congressman. And so it's just, I think people should take away from that is that I'm telling you, yeah, latch on to a hero, but you can also be a hero, right? And it may be something small, but it can snowball into something larger, right? So that totally shocked me. I was like, whoa, that's really great, you know? But he's still this young gentleman who is very humble, and he has no idea like the impact that he's having on his peers right now. We try to tell him, but he's like, nah, I'm not really like that. He's very soft-spoken. I think that's also an important thing that you should kind of be, you know, be humble, but not, you should definitely talk about your accolades when you can, right? And don't be afraid. You know, again, the worst thing that you could do is you fall down, but you know you're going to be able to get back up again, right? Because you've got a lot of support.
Thank you, Joe.
Just make I guess an observation. When I was in the Senate, I did a lot of work with youth. I had a lot of high school interns. They actually made the whole office environment and the work we did so much more interesting and exciting. I also had a student advisory committee, and we talked about different policy. We had, each meeting was a different kind of policy area that I was working on in the Senate. And just as a general observation, you know, I was just always so incredibly impressed with how articulate this generation is, how you know, how powerfully they speak from the heart, you know, with such, and, you know, they were really, in some senses, like better spokespeople than I was. I often just like, you know, would pass the mic to them to talk about whatever policy issues we were talking about. But that was like the source of my hopefulness, I should say, I guess, when I was in the Senate. And it was like really some of the best experiences that I had when I was in there was the work that I did with the youth that I encountered throughout the district that I represented. It was this big rural district. And these were kids coming from very different perspectives, very different backgrounds, but yeah, they just gave me a lot of hope for the future. So.
Can I also pop in and say something? Or do we have another question? I was just going to completely agree with everything that's been said so far. You know, you all are incredibly tapped into these world issues. I learn from my interactions with young people every day. Every single time I have a conversation with a young person, I feel like I'm learning from them as much as they might be learning from me. It's incredible. And I think I mentioned it before, but you all really have so much creativity that are the basis of solutions. And I just wanted to share one example. When we were in Vermont for that Columbia Climate School in the Green Mountains program, the students were tasked with creating the climate action plan for their area. And there were 2 students that were from the Arctic. One student was from Alaska and one was from Russia. And so they identified a huge challenge in their area was food insecurity. And they felt like people in their area had very poor health because they didn't have healthy food options. So what they wanted to create was a greenhouse that also had solar panels on the side, because a portion of the year, the Arctic has full sun, like all year round, or like all day. So they wanted to capture that energy with solar panels and store it in batteries, but have the greenhouse also take in that natural light and then use the battery in the dark, when the other portion of the year when it's very dark. So they created this very elaborate and complex plan but had thought through every detail. And it was so enlightening and very, it makes me very hopeful for the future, because you all have such incredible ideas and solutions and energy. And so I've never been more hopeful than talking with you all. So thank you.
Thank you. My next question is about the two policies that were mentioned during our panel. Matt mentioned the Green Amendment, and my question to Matt was, being that probably a lot of our youth panelists can't vote, and like myself, I can't vote, how can we advocate and efficiently advocate for amendments like the Green Amendment?
Yeah, I mean, sort of what Laurel was saying about, through social media and your passion for issues. Like I mentioned a little bit, you can urge others to vote. You can talk to parents or teachers or family members or friends who can vote. You can share things on social media talking about it, because it really does affect your generation, my generation, frankly, what's going to be happening with it for some time to come. So raising awareness, using your voice that you do have, is really the best strategy you can when you don't have those formal rights like suffrage.
Thank you. And my next quick question was for Senator Metzger, because you mentioned climate action that would be having hearings soon. I didn't get the name of it, and I'm sure a lot of attendees would want to know about that.
Yeah, so this is the New York State's climate action plan that is being created by this 22-member climate action council. And in the law, we created this council to develop this plan with public input. And then it has to be finalized. That there's a deadline in the law that it's going to be finalized next year. And then based on that plan, the state, the DEC, the state is going to create regulations to implement that and programs to implement that plan. So it's incredibly important. It's going to affect the whole kind of regulatory structure and funding and everything in New York State. And we required in the law that there be at least 6 public hearings around the state. And they haven't set the dates for them yet, but they are going to be, I imagine they're going to be early, like in the winter and spring, because the plan has to be done by July, like a final plan based on, changes that were made through public input. So, I mean, I'll certainly be putting out on social media, publicizing this, but you can go just to stay on top of what's going on with this Climate Action Council generally. They record all the meetings. You can watch all the meetings. And if you just Google New York Climate Action Council, you'll get to the website that has all of the documents, and eventually they'll be posting those dates. But I'm a policy advisor to New Yorkers for Clean Power. We'll be for sure publicizing that. And I just wanted to mention one other, just on the Proposition 2. A lot of people don't know that this often happens in elections. They just don't know that there are ballot initiatives. They don't even see them. They haven't taken the time to read them. They don't know how to vote. I mean, so anything you can do, anything people can do to talk about it and just make people aware of its existence is going to be critical. And to me, I think that it's hard. People don't vote. Unfortunately, they don't consider local elections important or as important as state and federal elections. And that's a mistake, because it's hugely important. It's your community and who's representing you and your community. But election turnout is often very low. But if people know that this critical amendment is on the constitutional amendment is on the ballot, they may be more likely to come out and vote. There's also a bunch of amendments relating to voting reforms that are incredibly important too, that will expand access to the ballot in New York State. So there's a lot there in November's ballot, and the more you can help get the word out about it, young people can help get the word out about it, the better shape we'll be in.
Thank you. Again, I'm here as a representative of the Human Rights Club, and I was particularly struck by Jalal's presentation and how his overall effort has demonstrated connections between climate justice, human rights, and community development. I thought that was a beautiful example of how environmental action is not only extremely beneficial to our planet and long-term society proactiveness, but environmental action also has many co-founding benefits such as community development, especially pertaining to our youth. My question to the panelists is, what are some co-founding solutions or co-founding benefits to environmental action that you have found significant or that have surprised you?
One of the projects that Groundwork Hudson Valley has been working on is a redlining project. Are you familiar with what redlining is?
Yes, I am, but
It would probably be good for you
you
to explain it for people who
Yes.
don't know what it is, though.
Sure. So redlining is basically, think of it as racial discrimination of any kind that is attached to housing. And it refers to basically this age-old practice where the government would outline areas where Black people and people of minorities would live, and then they would deem those places risky investments. So you couldn't get like a bank loan to go and get out of there, right? You were denied the ability to move into certain sections of the city because of the color of your skin, even if you were willing to pay over and above the amount. And that happened quite often. The banks would still go, no, you're a person of color. I mean, they wouldn't say it, but it was kind of known, right? That you could not get out of these places. And as a result of that, in those areas, not much money had been used to support the infrastructure there, meaning that there wasn't very much green infrastructure there. So our youth development program, which is our green team, green teamers, they went out and they actually went out in the communities and they were trying to look at the heat island effect. So if you're familiar with the heat island effect, is basically it's the heat that gets absorbed on a daily basis in your community, and that it reflects that heat back. So it causes the temperature in that area to be even hotter, right? So if you don't have any green space, it creates all of these hot areas in the community, right? So all of these places that were redlined didn't have any green spaces because none of that was being invested in by the township or the government, because again, it was a redlined area. So our green teamers went out into communities. They took heat sensors, heat guns. They actually went out and physically go, how hot is here? How hot is it there? And they made the comparison between places that were where municipal housing was, where there wasn't any green space, and then places where like a little bit more in the suburbs, and you saw there was trees, right? So there was kind of like this data that they could play from now, right? So it's true, the temperature does go up when there aren't any trees, and the temperature goes down when there is shade, right? Obviously, if it's hot, you go into the shade and you get cool, right? And so they started realizing like, oh my goodness, like this is the reason why, climate change is adversely affecting people of color even more, right? Because where they're living, where they've historically lived or been forced to live, doesn't have any green space. So all the more reason to start helping them create these green spaces to add value to the homes that they live in, to obviously the health benefits that are there, right? You know, they talk about people looking out your window and being able to see a tree, and that has this calming effect on people, right? But imagine you spend all your days staring at a concrete wall, right? Which is what happens in a lot of these places that have been redlined. So it was, you know, our green team kind of took it on. They were like, they were just talking about, you know, heat island effect, and that heat island effect parlayed into finding out about these redlined areas. And there's this correlation, and actually there's a map that we have that you can overlay, and you can see that where it's hot is also places that have been redlined, right? So there's proof, right? And if you need any other proof, you can kind of look at places that get more green spaces tend to be more affluent places. If you look at New York City, so if you look at New York City in any of the 5 boroughs, you look at any of the communities that surround a large park, and they're affluent areas. They tend not to be redlined areas. We found this out in Yonkers, and you know, it's happened all over the United States, right? And so now people are kind of waking up to all of these things, and now we're starting to, throughout the Groundwork network, we've been working with different groups to talk about redlining and how can we create more green infrastructure, which is why we're also investing in our youth development to help them be able to identify those things within a community and go, oh, hey, this is a great place to have a rain garden. Wait, you know what? We need to put in a culvert over here. We need to do some hardscaping here, and then we can create more trees here, right? So this is what we're investing in with them, so that we know that the Green New Deal is going to be is real, and that it's really going to happen, right? It's just a matter of time. And so we're preparing all of the people that are on the green team for jobs, right? So this is another way of economically kind of supporting the community that has been overlooked or underrepresented or discriminated against.
I would just speak to something that I mentioned about like community land trust. For me, that has been like a solution that we've been looking at with the Kite young people on, like how are we using land space? And so Kite is in Hudson, which is a small town that is 2 square miles, like on the Hudson River. And for me, my work around prison is like, we're like a small town that has a prison in it, right? So we have a prison that is taking up a lot of the 2 square miles, and a lot of folks don't have access to food, like I've talked about, and don't have adequate housing or affordable housing at all. And so working with the young people on like creating a campaign to like, how do we use the 2 square miles in Hudson to actually like house people in affordable housing instead of like house people in prisons. And so looking at that prison land to be used as potential like land trust space that we can use for housing and green space. So just thinking about, how are we using land to like actually not put people in prison and like punish folks, but thinking about ways to house people and grow food and do things that are actually like beneficial to our spaces is one thing I feel like we should be working on.
Thank you, Jalal and Jalal. My last question. A lot of our panelists started their path to working in climate change with higher education concentrations in environmental studies, sustainability, and marine sciences. A lot of our panelists have a lot of experience in agriculture or policy. And a lot of our high school youth are trying to figure out how we can make our passions our careers. My next question is, what is your advice to kids that want to seek out environmentally focused majors and careers? And what do you think the future of the job field will look like?
Well, I guess I'll start by making just one point, which is, it's we're in this place right now. It's not just in New York; it's everywhere, where people are not pursuing like the trades anymore, really, or it's and this is and farming as well. I mean, we don't have nearly enough farmers, and actually in New York State, most of the farmers, a large majority of them are 65 and older, and we need to be growing food, as Jalal said. So, but we also don't, we don't have like the skilled workforce to go into, like remaking our built environment, and that is so critical to getting to where we need to be. And uh, I feel like there's like the kind of almost a cultural stigma about these jobs, these types of jobs, and they're well-paying, family-sustaining jobs, and it's also like being part of the that it's being part of the transition that we need to make. So, I want to make a plug for those those career pathways as well. They're not the ones that are most chosen. And and for farming, we need far more farmers that are really focused on regenerative farming practices and organic farming practices. In New York, we're like, we're like going to be like a breadbasket, really, for other places. I think a good part of the country is becoming truly, is running out of water, like California, which grows half our food, is they're running out of resources. So it's very important that we don't lose sight of that, and protecting land is really a big piece of that as well. So that out there. And affordable access to land is a really big one too. Sorry, I can go on about this issue. We don't have enough affordable access to land for farmers, for new and young farmers either. And that's, we have to be investing more in making land more accessible to people for farming.
Okay, thank you to all of our panelists. That was the end of my questions. And thank you, Clearwater, for having me. And I will turn it over to Matt Salton.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dior, for asking those great questions. That really sparked some good dialogue. We just wanted to thank everybody for coming to this. Hopefully you learned something. If you have any more questions, feel free to reach out. Anywhere on the Clearwater website, you can find emails and everything else. And also to follow us on social media so you can find out what we're up to on Facebook, Hudson River Sloop Clearwater, on Instagram and Twitter, Sloop Clearwater. You can find out what all these good people are up to as well. And we'll be sharing around. And thank you so much for attending and for showing a dedication to combating the climate crisis. So thank you so much.
Thank you all so much.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Clearwater. It's been great.
Thank you, Matt and Clearwater.
Yeah, thank y'all.